Hello, I'm Crystal Petry. Welcome to another episode of 60 Minutes With. This week, we are talking about building community. Yes, I know you've heard that word 1,000 times, but it does not take away the importance and the necessity of having community. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you subscribe to my podcast right now as I welcome Sheila Amir to the podcast. So, welcome to the podcast, Sheila.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do the podcast. Obviously, we are virtually doing this podcast. So, where in the world is Sheila?
I'm in Durham, North Carolina, known as the Bull City, my personal favorite city on earth.
Oh, right. I'm sure everyone out there would agree with you.
Yes, we're very in love with our own city here.
Okay, so you build community, which I guess is ironic. It's something I've never really heard of. I know that organizations, try and build community. I know employers, try and build a community within their organization. But can you tell me and tell my audience what is building community?
Yeah. So I think of it in kind of two folds. We have the organic community that we build around us. We can think of that as an extended family, our net within the community. And that is just humanity. Like we have our, essentially you could say, I know it's maybe in a different way, you could say it's our tribe. It's those that we belong to and feel a deeper sense of connection than just that's a stranger walking by me. And that happens when you go to school, or now I'm learning as your kid goes to school. It happens as you have like even a grocery store that you frequent and you have checkers that you get to know. It happens at college, in the workplace. And so you start to build your community. Oftentimes we go into the world with the community that our parents built for us. When you move to a new city, you've got to start all over again. There's also, as you mentioned, the business structure of community. So I run a hybrid membership program. It's predominantly online. We have a lot of in-person events for small business owners. And anyone that's an entrepreneur can tell you it is a lonely road where many of your milestones, there's not a Hallmark card for. And if you were to share your milestones with like your Facebook friends or on any social media platform, or even at family dinner, people are going to look at you a kind of way. You're going to get some really hurtful comments, So if you share, oh, I just had my first $10,000 day, people aren't going to see all the work that it took to have that $10,000 day. They're not going to be able to have the conversations of gross versus net, all of those things. But if you have a community where everybody's in there, and everybody believes that they can then have their $10,000 day because you did, that's going to hit different. It also, like, we all have that family member that's sloppy. Like, we all have that family member that, like, no matter what you post, they're going to say something that you're just like, wash your laundry before you air it out. And so they're going to be asking for money if you post that you had your $10,000 day. So community is really intentional connection that happens with those we come in contact with, that we want to remain in contact. So it's weaving that net that when we fall, because we all do, who's going to catch us?
One of the things that I want to make sure that my audience takes away from this podcast, number one, is how to build community. And number two, the importance of having community. And you talked about it very well, but just for you personally, why is community important to you?
Yeah, so as I've mentioned, I live in Durham, North Carolina. It's not Raleigh-Durham. Those are two different cities with two very different ways of operating. And I've coined a term, or I like to say that I've coined it just because I like a good alliteration or metaphor, but Durham currency. I can get really far in my city based on the fact that I've poured into my community. They're going to pour back into me. I'm talking photography, videography, special locations. you name it. Because I authentically showed up and got to know people on a one-on-one basis, didn't have anything to get out of it. And then when I need something, I reach out and it's provided. And I actually have a less than 24-hour-old example of this.
Yay.
So I have my rescue dog down here. He's had a little help sleeping because he's a 1-year-old puppy, and as soon as I get on a Zoom call, he's always trying to be invited. He needs some training. He's got being cute down, but like sitting and not barking are very hard for him, and we'll get him there. And I met one person, they were not a fit, to say the least. And I know that there are other trainers out there, but I personally have not trained a dog in over 20 years because I rescue dogs. They tend to come pre-trained.
Okay.
And so I went on my Instagram for my company. I try not to use it for personal uses, but this was a situation. He's barking during business calls. So yes, it is business. And I asked for recommendations to trainers. I shared our budget. I made it a funny post about like our most recent employee is now on probation. He has 90 days to complete his employee improvement plan. And I reached out to the first one that I saw, got another comment. So I reached out to them. I was like, until we find the right fit. Now, and then I felt bad that I didn't reach out to everybody. So I reached out to every trainer recommended and then like had to turn off my phone.
Wow.
Now today I have too many trainers calling me back because I didn't want anybody to feel left out.
No.
But I asked one question and my whole community pulled up. They're sharing it in their Instagram stories. They're reaching out to their dog trainers. Everybody's like on Team Astro right now. They want him to get promoted to being a good boy. Like they're invested in that story. So I know that people talk about community engagement, like in likes and clicks, but like I have people putting their name out there on the line on my 1-year-old dog. They have yet to meet. Like we just got him. So
right.
To me, that's the importance of it because I put into my community and it had nothing. He didn't exist when I started, building my network here. And here he is, and he's getting top of the line treatment because his mom cares about the community. And that was all Durham currency is what I call that.
Okay. So everyone is wanting to know, did you pick a trainer?
I went with the first woman who called. There were men and women candidates, and the woman, we hit it off. So, yes, I have to fill out the forms and everything. And if that all jives for her and for me, then yes, we picked a very nice lady.
Perfect. Perfect. Who taught you the importance of community?
I think the most honest and direct answer of that is Black women. Durham, North Carolina, the population here is always going back and forth between 41 and 40% Black and 41% white, and then Latinx and other individuals like myself. And I'm from a predominantly white state of Wyoming. And so I've heard of the term community, you hear it online, but until I was in community with the majority of my friends and people in my extended network are Black women, I didn't truly know what that word meant, how to be in community and how it felt and how important it is. Showing up as your full self, being responsible for the energy that you bring, choosing what you say wisely, not just to take up space in that conversation, listening more than you speak, and really understanding impact over intention all day, every day. And I'm very blessed to get invited into sacred spaces that I'm the only person there who is not a Black woman. And and to be respectful of that and understand how rare and privileged that is. And so it's not to say that individuals who are born different than that into this world don't understand community or don't know how to operate, but that's really where I learned it. I learned, we're all here about something that the community could choose to ignore. And instead we're like, nope, we'll see you Wednesday at this restaurant and we're going to talk about it.
Yes.
And really seeing the power of that.
How does someone, and I'm sure you can answer this question directly, How does someone start to build community?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's a question a lot of people have. Loneliness is a current pandemic that's not getting spoken about a lot. It's why we're seeing so much anger. It's why like hate is the current trend, is
Yes.
people are very lonely and feeling like they don't matter. And so their words and actions have to get bigger and bigger and bigger to garner attention. And I'm here to say, even if you don't know a soul in your city, it's possible. So I moved to Durham, North Carolina. I knew one person here. I do not speak with my parents. I don't speak with too much of my family. So it was just me and my dogs. And like dogs are great and all, but like they're not people. And so I meet a lot of people actually walking my dog. So I don't have a choice. If you have a dog and you live in an apartment community, you will know all your neighbors. You will see them in their morning glory. You will see them, having a moment when their dog just won't behave, all of that. So you get to know your neighbors in that way. I might not know their name, but I know their dog's name. And for me, going to, pre-COVID and now post-COVID, going to a lot of community events, coworkers as you come across to them, and really paying attention to how do you feel in their presence. Are they I just see that person at work, and who are you in their presence? Are you able to show up as your best self? Do you feel comfortable sharing honestly? If they put you down as a reference on something, what would you have to say about them, and vice versa? So really being thoughtful in your connections with people. I did this one person at a time. I mean, I had a project attached to it. I wrote a living history book about Durham. And much like you, at the end of every interview, I asked who would be a great contribution to this project.
Mm-hmm.
And that allowed the project to kind of write itself. And so in that way, I became one of the most well-connected people in my community, but I have social anxiety like you wouldn't believe. And so
I wouldn't believe that.
I love public speaking. Put me in the crowd where I know people. No. Unless you want to find me underneath the cheese table in that case, but bring me a glass of wine. I'll be fine. So for me, it was one at a time. I'm a huge introvert, like painfully introverted at times. And so which means, it's not that I don't like people or being around them. It just takes me a long time to recover. I'm observant in that conversation, which I have found is actually why I have such a strong community, because I'm listening, I'm observing, and I don't want to interrupt a conversation. And then when I'm invited into that conversation, I've actually heard what's going on. And so I'm contributing, not just what I want to say, I'm contributing, we're building, we're Legos versus just, I want to be heard.
Mm-hmm. You know what? And this is a pivot, then I'll come back to the podcast. One of the things that I have discovered, and maybe you can speak to this, because I am an active listener, which what you were talking about is basically what that is, an active listener. Like you are listening to what people are saying. And what I have come across is, as I'm actively listening to people and having conversations, people are so used to being interrupted when they're talking that when I'm actively listening and I want you to complete your thought and I want you to complete what you're saying, they're like looking at me like as if you haven't interrupted me yet. Don't you have, and I'm like, finish your thought and then I will, say whatever or add to the conversation. But it's so weird that people are so used to being interrupted when they speak that they expect everyone to do it. I'm like, I don't do that. Like I'm actively, what you have to say is important to me. I value it. And I want to hear what you have to say instead of just jumping in and saying something just for the sake of saying something.
Yeah. I've been asked a lot, like, are you still there? Like if it's on the phone, like, are you still there? Or if it's a Zoom call, it's like, I think your screen's freezing up. And I'm like, it could be, that's a possibility, but I'm also, I don't want to interrupt you. Not to say that I never interrupt. I do have a bit of a short-term memory problem. So sometimes I'm like, before I forget, is it okay if I share something really quick? But I want to hear what you have to say, or, I'll be quick to people see me writing notes down all the time because I don't want to forget things. but it is rare, especially if you've been in a corporate setting. And especially if you're not who was intended to be at those tables. We are often interrupted as soon as they have heard our great idea and try to reframe it as theirs.
Yes.
So and there's also on the flip side of that, the scarcity mindset. I'm so lucky to be at this table. I've got to get this out while I'm here. I was told to speak up during meetings. And so we really have lost, I think a part of that is the pandemic, but I also think just culturally we've lost, there's such an urgency and capitalism requires that we move at the pace, that's of machines. That's not what we are. And then the one thing that we all need is connection, which is different than being glued to your screen. Sometimes that's the only avenue of connection, but there's so much around that you're missing. And as someone, my business is predominantly online, and I've had several wake-up calls because we've gotten so used to the screen life during the pandemic that, like, when you have a 3-year-old in your face saying, "Hi, Mom, I'm here," you're like, thank you for always humbling me 3-4 times a day. Thanks. So I think it's a skill. People notice it. Active listening is something that we learn, because if you think about it, we're born to have all of our needs met. And if they're not, we're going to be verbal about it.
Yes.
Until they're met.
Yes, until they're met. Yes. And a lot of people don't grow out of that, throwing the fits, and they just show it in a different way. But that's a podcast for a different time. So if someone, maybe they are in Durham, wants to connect with you, wants you to help them become a part of community or build their own community, how can people connect with you?
I've been on phone calls and text messages all day. So I guess my phone that we just talked about. We have social media. I've kind of phased that out until we have someone that is just in charge of that. The ROI hasn't been there. bullsofdurham.com, we're always referring people there. Half the city has my email or my phone number. So I'm about 2 people removed from everybody. It's not hard to get a hold of me.
Okay.
If they're having difficulty getting a hold of me, is there a reason? That would be my other thing, because my community might be gatekeeping in the positive way. That is one thing. That is another aspect of community that Durham specifically has taught me. They check you, like everyone in this community, if they're from around here and they genuinely enjoy this indescriptible je ne sais quoi quality of Durham, you can start asking questions. They're going to ask more of you. And it's not in like a mean way, but it's like, before you get too far and get too close, who are you? And it's the shoulder to shoulder. Like, I don't know if you're safe for me, which means you might not be safe for those I stand shoulder to shoulder with. So you get checked. Like, I'm not a basketballologist, but I feel like it's like that thing where they check each other at the beginning. So I could see if they had inauthentic, whatever they're going about, or if they're a transactional person, I'm just here to get this and get out. I could see my community real quick checking that, and I would never know about it. And that's part of showing up in community, is we keep each other safe mentally and physically. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. What is diversity for you, and what is inclusion?
Those are great questions. More buzzwords that have diluted the realness of important things. So diversity to me, in addition to who you're born into this world as not being the same as everyone else in the room. I'm Iranian American. I've always been the one in the room unless my sister shows up. And I've been in spaces where I am the only person with brown hair, with the darkest complexion, and the only one that has something different to say. And I think one of the biggest things we're missing out on when we're in a room where everybody looks like us, I call those diversity deserts, is we're missing out on a completely different perspective, and looking at things from different angles is so valuable. I think I can't think of a better gift that someone can give me than being able to go, I never thought of it like that.
Yes.
Like if you slow me up like that, that is a blessing. And my face might look otherwise, but it's a huge blessing. And so diversity of lived life experience, diversity in education. I live in a very well-educated place. We've got college, we've got Duke, we've got Central, we've got NC State over here, we've got UNC Chapel Hill, where Michael Jordan went. We have all these great colleges.
Throw that out there.
And we have Shaw University. We have Durham Tech. So we have very well-educated individuals, but I meet people who are equally geniused without even a high school diploma. You can walk into a Durham coffee shop and sit down next to a tattoo artist with a PhD in this, a candle shop owner who has a PhD in environmental justice, and a comic book enthusiast, and the CEO of one of the largest companies here, and a teacher and an artist, and we're all equals. And we're all able to hold conversation, or we're all able to say things like, hey, I'm here because I really needed to concentrate. The kids were like in my business at home, and they'll know to be quiet and not be offended and not take that personally. And so when you have, that's just dope. It's not the norm to say the least. But when you have all those unique vantage points in the room, we're all in the same coffee shop. We're all at the same address, but we've come there from completely different places. And so when you have diversity in who you were born into this world as, and you have diversity in age, just the experience that we get every day, we're getting more and more experienced, diversity and just in perspective, so one person might be Han Soloing it like I am and not have to care for aging parents. I have one kid, one dog. And so while those are true responsibilities and one business, that's not as much responsibility as many people who are in my same elder millennials are taking care of parents,
right?
They're taking care of multiple kids. They might have a couple marriages under their belt. Maybe they work in a corporation where they're not being seen. All of those variables make us all look at the same cup of coffee a very different way, and where you are at in your life journey. The way I looked at a cup of coffee when my daughter was 2 weeks old versus the way I look at a cup of coffee now, two different things. One might have been borderline inappropriate, but they're two different things. And so I think diversity is the differences that makes everybody shine as a gem. That would be what it is to me. Differences are your superpower. If someone is saying otherwise, they're not a safe person.
And what about inclusion?
Inclusion. So this is something I have a fear of making people feel left out. I'm working on it. I think it's like the last bit of my recovering people pleaser. But very quickly, this is a dear friend, Anitra, taught me this because I was joking with her about at the cool kid table. And she said, F the cool kid table. We're at the fun kid table. And there's always room for one more. And I was like, did we just become best friends?
Yeah.
I think it just happened. And that was like 10 years ago. So we did. It's being at the fun kid table. As somebody that was excluded for being different as a kid, like that hit. And so occlusion is, and that's something even in Iranian culture, it's a thing to have one extra. If you're sitting at a physical table, to have another chair open. If we're sitting on the floor for a traditional meal, having another cushion, because what if the neighbor comes over?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you want to make sure they have enough food for the neighbor. And, we all understand there's times when financially that's not a thing. And there's trying to remember where the saying comes from, but there are some cultures where they leave a light on. It used to be a candle back in the day in case somebody was lost and needed a place to stay. So inclusion is there's room for one more.
I love
Okay,
it.
one more came. There's still room for one more. And another aspect of that, or another perspective that's forever changed my life and the way I think about that, Dr. Yaba Blay, the most, like they say not to meet your heroes, it's too late. She is the most profound, amazing human being I've ever had the pleasure to sit down with. I can't even begin. Just when you Google her name, like you'll be there for a minute. It's just accomplishments and amazingness nonstop. And I remember I got to interview her, and I tried not to learn about these people before I interviewed them for my project. And so I walked in blind, and that was a poor choice with Yaba. But I was really grumpy. There were signs up all over town, and they had like multiple languages. And basically they were saying, you know, it was during 2016, 2017, when everybody was very tense, feeling very this way or that way. There was no middle ground, very polarized. Yes. And these signs were Durham trying to say everybody's welcome, everybody's included. Some of them said everybody's tolerated. And I remember I sat down, I had no idea who I'm sitting down with, not like the global authority on colorism, the woman that schooled Ibram Hicks, Kennedy, and ex-Kennedy, the Yaba he mentions in his book, How to Be Anti-Racist, that Yaba.
Wow.
Yes. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg. She is just amazing. So she can see that I'm feeling a kind of way and says, what's up? And I was like, that sign on the door, it's all over town. I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be included. And I gave like a little background of, you know, growing up different in Wyoming. And she's like, this changed my whole life. She said, I don't want to be tolerated or included. That tells me whose house I'm in.
Wow. Wow.
Like even when I reshare the story, like 7 years later, like I get chills because that forever changed every bit of DNA in my body. I've never looked at the world the same since then. And inclusion is you not having to worry about whose house you're in. You're welcome.
Yes. And
it's not if you can come in or not.
Feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah.
And who decided that it's their house? There's questions. I mean, that's a much bigger topic, but whenever I think of including people, it's really making them feel welcome and at ease. So they're not worried about like, well, it's not my house. Because you're going to act different. You might be on your best behavior, but also if a cup breaks and falls, you're not going to clean it up because it's not your house.
Yes. Yes. I didn't know, and I'll just be really honest here. As a Black woman, and you know, this story about you know, I don't want to be included or tolerated because it lets me know whose house I'm in. When I walk into certain spaces, I can tell that I'm a Black woman by the way they look at me, the way they handle me, the way they speak to me. You can just, and I'm sure like my Black audience, they know exactly the feeling. They know exactly what I'm talking about. When you walk into a space, whether that's a restaurant or somebody's house or a business, they make you feel a certain way. So that really hit home to me, you know, not wanting to be tolerated or included because you know whose house you're in. You just want to feel welcome. Wow. This is why I love this podcast, because people teach me so much and educate me so much. It's why I'm so passionate about this podcast. It really, really is.
Oh, I will take no credit for that. That was Yaba. But I have not met anyone else who has met her who can't pinpoint the moment she completely like dismantled their whole brain. Like I'm still collecting my brain off the wall. Yeah. Like that restaurant doesn't even exist anymore. And I'm like, can I come in? I left some of my mind over there.
Yeah.
Truly just, she's a gift of a person and a total Sagittarius. Those are like her two big takeaways. definitely worth Googling. She made Brene Brown's brain stop on a podcast episode. And I'm like, I don't think I've ever screamed so much listening to a podcast, because I was like, that's my girl. That's Robin. Because Brene came to a full stop, and she couldn't, she's stuttering, and it was like she was glitching, and it was beautiful and wonderful. And she super appreciated that. Yeah. So when you open yourself up to being in community, to breaking bread, which, I'm gluten-free, so I'm probably not a good metaphor, but to sitting down at a table with somebody and seeing them for who they are and what they've brought to the table, not for what you're going to get out of it, but just they brought them whole selves to the table, or they're tired and they brought what they could. It changes and shapes your whole life. Mm-hmm. When I say that there's no better gift than when you're like, I've never thought of it like that. Mm-hmm. She changed my whole life. I'm a better mother to a Black girl because of her. Wow. And Amira did not exist. My daughter's name, probably didn't need to share that, but that's okay. She didn't exist when I met Yaba. I hadn't even met her dad, I don't think, at that point. So she's really just made me think of how I show up. I'm able to have a greater level of empathy and understanding when you share that you can walk into a place and be very aware, I am the Black person in this room. I am the Black woman in this room. The hyper awareness, mm-hmm. the concern for safety. I understand that because I've heard those stories. I've been privileged to hear those stories.
Yeah.
And be able to not burst into tears and interrupt and try to mitigate it so that I don't feel bad, and so that I can be there for their experience without adding my bullshit to it. Yes. And that helps me be a better mom, because there's going to be times that happens to my daughter.
Absolutely.
And, or for me to understand that how important it is for her to be in community from the get with the other Black girls in class. She might not have to be best friends with them, but how important it is to foster those connections, and how that's her safety.
Yeah.
I would have never known that if I wouldn't have sat down and shut up. Oh, that's a part of being in community.
So many people need to do that. Sit down and shut up and just listen.
Where would we be? And first off, it's very relaxing. Everybody says they need a minute to just sit down. Okay. How many times are you not taking the opportunity, Chad?
Oh my God. I'm loving you, Sheila, and I'm loving this podcast.
Yeah. So yes. I think if you're conscious about, this is something that I want friendships. I want those connections, because it's not always, you're not going to like everybody. Mm-hmm. That's one of the first lessons you get when you have a parent who's an immigrant. You're not going to like everybody, but you're going to be civil to everybody, and not everybody's going to like you. And that's a safety thing. Mm-hmm. And so I get where he was coming from, but also that makes getting through college a lot easier. That makes being the new person at a job a lot easier. Yes. It's made me, I think it's one of the reasons I'm comfortable. I know that there are many women who are not comfortable going out to eat by themselves.
Oh, I love it.
It's one of my favorite things. One, because I love eavesdropping. When I say that I'm an active listener, it's not always of pure intent. I love me some eavesdropping. It's my hobby. I could have been a great hairdresser, but, being able to do that, because I'm there to observe, enjoy my meal kind of thing. But when that's something you're afraid of, how are you opening yourself up to meeting new people, having those new experiences? And what will your experience be like if you have to show up and you're not comfortable, and just, because a lot of times when people run their mouth, it's out of discomfort. It's to fill a gap. A lot of times.
Yeah.
And I think, I've had another friend that taught me, if you really want something in life from somebody, be quiet. And what she's saying is, as you're having that conversation, like a job negotiation or in a collaboration negotiation, present what's your ideal, and let them, a lot of people are thinking out loud, and just give them the space and silence to do that. Sometimes we just need a minute to, okay, that works.
Right. Or how can I make that work? Like, I can do this, I can do that. We can bring in this person. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep. And I'm very blessed. Where I live is very community focused.
Excellent. I feel like they need to put you on a poster or something.
I'm around enough.
Yeah.
So it's, I always describe Durham is, who can I connect you to? Once you've matched, passed the check, it's who can I connect you to? Oh, this would be, oh, you're working on this. You need to call my friend so-and-so, drop my name like it's hot. Or you might know somebody that'd be a great fit for whatever this person is trying to do, but like they might not be in good standing with you. And just say, don't mention my name, but reach out to so-and-so.
Right.
So they're not even going to let their beef impact your trajectory in life. Unless this person is like seriously ungood, and then they're gonna be like, watch out for this person. So, and then Raleigh is, who do you know? Not who can I connect you to, but who do you know? And so it's very hard for newcomers. That's what's been shared with me. I don't live in Raleigh. I try not to frequent Raleigh. We do go over there because it's next door. But I've had multiple friends who are just like, I tried living in Raleigh for 1 year. Rent's a little cheaper, or it goes back and forth, but. So I'm fortunate that the way has been modeled for me as the norm.
Okay. Why is diversity and inclusion important in community? And this is me asking from a biased point of view, obviously, because I'm assuming that diversity and inclusion is important in community. So if it's not, please check me on that bias. But I feel like it is. So why is it important in community?
I wouldn't say it's bias. I would say it's education from a lived life experience. That would be my ideology there. So a bias is kind of, there can be good and there can be bad biases. And so I just think in this particular instance, words matter. They mean things. I don't think it's a bias. I think it's lived life experience, which is learned, lived education. Diversity and inclusion are important in community because if you're in a sea of like-minded people and the great idea everybody has is to jump off the ledge, no one is there to be like, I saw Lenny jump off a cliff and he died. And so like, I'm thinking that's not a good idea. Or, hey, not going to do that, so it's a culture of like yes men, or however that, the expression goes. And so you're missing out. It is so hard to explain to people who, being originally from Wyoming, I am kind of the diversity token that of many of my friends, the very few that I kept from there. And just to see how much of life they're missing out on. It's so sad. So I think like, is it community or is it like mob mentality? This is, those are different, because when you get a group of people together, they get amped up and they're going this direction. If nobody's like, hey, let's leave, or I don't think that's a good idea, or let's slow this up, pause and consider some other options. So when you have different people at the table or in the room who have brought different levels of themselves and life experience to the table, you're going to get something completely different. I am so blessed that I have like a wildly diverse background. My father is from Iran. And my mom is the all-American cheerleader, track star, blonde hair, fair skin, white girl from Middle America, Iowa.
Okay.
Those are different. And then to top it all off, they raised me in Wyoming, the state nobody knows exists. I think they do a little bit now because of Kanye and the Yellowstone TV show, but like that whole square above Colorado, very rural place. And then on top of that, my dad owned an auto salvage. So that's where we were a lot of the times we didn't have our house there, but I essentially grew up in an auto salvage. That's where I did all my homework. That's where I went after school. And so you just learn to be able to talk to everybody from all walks of life, regardless of, my dad's financial status was often different than the people that came and bought used car parts from him.
Mm-hmm.
And he would talk to them just like he would talk to our neighbors in our really nice neighborhood.
Okay.
Kind of thing. And so being able to, those are two different households. I grew up with two different households, child of divorce. And I mean, I am my dad's American dream. And so I have the benefit of, I always feel bad because my daughter doesn't have an immigrant parent, because I'm like, that opened the whole world to me.
Okay.
I knew that what was going on here in rural America, this tiny little town, wasn't it. It was an experience, but there's this whole big world. I have family in Germany and Switzerland and New Zealand. And so I don't have that worry that this is it. Like if it goes to heck in a handbasket around here, which it is, there, for me, it's Durham or not the United States. And so, but it's like, there's this whole big, beautiful world out there.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't the only way you can do things. And so, I often feel like that's a shortcoming that my daughter is getting. It's like, she also has a very diverse background. And so I try to surround her. I'm very intentional about it. She goes to a preschool where everybody in her classroom is different. Like, it looks like the world looks. Kids across the ethnic background, racial background. There's a gender non-conforming child. That's what they prefer instead of non-binary. And we were able to have that conversation. And her teacher is an immigrant and Muslim. And those were all like, oh my gosh, take my money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when people don't understand the value of diversity, it's like, it's a pretty big fat check for my daughter's preschool every month. And that's why I signed that check.
Yes.
Like, you can go to a Montessori school. And, I also understand, again, because of the people that have enveloped me into their community, being predominantly Black women, I also know that a challenge that she's going to have, I wouldn't have thought of until they brought it to my perspective. And then I realized I had this happen in my own way, is she's going to have the challenge where she's either the only Black girl in the room, or because she's multicultural, she's not Black enough.
Exactly.
And because I was able to sit down and shut up, those stories were shared with me from firsthand experience as the mother, as the individual that went through that. These stories are being shared with me. And I don't want my daughter's headspace going to either of those things, when I want it to be filled with knowledge and positive experience and plucking dandelions and all those other things. But she has so much to learn. She doesn't need to sacrifice her brain cells to, am I safe? Is this why they're saying that? Is the teacher going to call on me when I raise my hand?
Right.
Am I in trouble for this situation because of this, or because I actually did something wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are they in danger from my mom because she's going to pull up? Or is this something where, like, maybe I was a contributing factor, So I wouldn't have heard those stories if I was sharing what it was like to grow up in rural Wyoming for me.
Yeah. How did you get people to become a part of your community? Because I feel like when you have community, that's a huge trust factor. That's a huge me trusting you. This is how I'm showing you that I trust you. So how did you get people to become a part of your community?
I think because I pull up. Like, I don't really have, like, yeah, if I'm there to interview somebody for my project is how I met a lot of people here. But it wasn't like, if this interview goes bad and it's not good it doesn't fit with the narrative of the book, or it doesn't add it to the history, that I'm not going to use it. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to do this interview and we're never speaking again. And I think real recognizes real, as played out as that expression is. But because I didn't show up, I didn't try to we've all been to networking experiences where it's just like they see who are you, what do you do? They do the quick math in their head and then they walk off.
Yes.
I am whatever the opposite of that is. I think this is one big value of growing up in very rural America. There's only 500,000 people in the state of Wyoming. You're always going to be kind to people. Maybe not nice, but you will be kind because you're gonna see them again. There ain't nobody else to see. So they might be pulling your car out of a ditch. They might marry your sister. They might be your boss later. You are going to see that person again. So you might as well be nice because you never know if you're going to need them in the middle of a blizzard or whatever else it is. So I always operate as if you're going to run into that person again. I think that's just what my experience has taught me to do. And I've lived in some big cities now, Phoenix, fifth largest city in America, and that's about as big as I would go. And here in Durham, which is kind of part of a larger metropolitan area. So I think I got people to be a part of my community because I just assumed they were. So operating as if like we talked like 2 years ago, and I remember you said that this was a life goal, and I just met this person, and they're like, you can't remember 5 minutes ago? And I was like, well, here you go. I think they seem legit.
Yes.
Or, and I think because I've always lived my life in a way that if someone has something bad to say about me, the response they're going to get 100% of the time is, what did you do to her?
Wow. Okay.
And I've seen that play out over and over and over again. And it always has been somebody that has had horrible intentions and acted inauthentically. And maybe that's the value of community. It might be a chicken and the egg kind of sitch. But when you have a good community that you've built, that you've poured into, they're that safety net that we discussed at the top. They're there to catch you. They're there to cheer you on. Equally important things.
Can community belong to just one person?
No, that's a cult.
I didn't even think about that when I wrote that question. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Next question. Is community an overused word?
Yeah.
Has it been diluted?
I think it's like the next synergy. I'm like, I can't even remember what synergy actually used to mean. Like, now we call it a vibe check.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very overused. I think it's appropriation. I'm like trying to sugarcoat things that I have no ability to sugarcoat. I'm not going to give anybody metaphorical diabetes here. When you see that the people that know how to operate in community, who build communities, who understand the importance, not just for their career, but for their safety and their quality of life, and the people that you can feel relaxed and safe around and experience joy with, because that's a very vulnerable thing. Being the Black community, of course it's going to be co-opt. Of course it is. It's going to be the long nails, different colored hair. It's giving, just like we take expressions. It's going to be country music. It's going to be rock and roll. It's going to be all the other things that we've mined out of Black culture, with the exception of resilience, because we don't, that needs to be appropriated. If we could start with that, because fragility is killing people.
It is.
Yeah, long and short of it, without being too controversial and saying the truth too much, like Jay-Z says, I tell the truth when I get nervous. Yeah, it's getting played out. It's appropriated, and it makes it seem like if I pay this whatever a month to join this membership, I have a community. And I'm saying that as somebody who has a subscription-based membership plan, but it's what I tell my members, like in their enrollment email, in person, at every event, every time I see their engagement's low and I'm getting after them. You're going to get out of this what you put into it. Like, in Durham currency, I'm a freaking billionaire,
Yeah.
regardless of what my bank account says. And it's not because I did that. You can exploit people to become a billionaire in your bank account. You can't exploit people to become a billionaire in the currency of relationships. One to many doesn't work like that. But again, like the example of a dog needs help being his best self.
Mm-hmm.
He was really on my last nerve. I shared that with my community. I made them joke. I made it with like even the text fit within the context of where that was going. And now I have like 9 dog trainers to get back to. And I already told the first one yes. So like these are the good problems to have when you pull up. Now,
It is.
are you going to see that in every social media account? No. You're not. Like you're just not. You might have seen recommendations of people that know that the dog trainer needs some money and they need more clients,
Mm-hmm.
but they knew who I would and wouldn't work with. So that was also very interesting to see as I'm going to everybody's website and reading about them. And we found someone that's a great fit for us. So yeah.
What is your personal intention in the space of building community?
For me, I would say it's the same and different, I guess, depending on what that community is. I want everybody. I'm a firm believer that a rising tide floats all boats.
Okay.
I within our membership, if I find something that makes my life easier, even though I run the membership, but if I find a asset or a quick fix that makes my day to day as a business owner easier, I'm going to share it with them. If I have a really good learning experience, I'm going to sit with it, and then I'm going to share it with them because maybe they don't need to fall flat on their face, metaphorically or actually, but they can take the lesson. And so even when, when we're starting to build that community of moms and other parents for, who's like, we're trying to figure out the whole birthday party thing. We didn't know you invited the whole class. And she's 3. I didn't know that started this soon. And then we didn't realize that like her birthday weekend's pretty much always going to be graduation weekend when you live in a college mecca.
No.
Yeah, and that all the parks are rented out, and her
Yes.
dad didn't know about venue pricing, and so we're having this learning curve. And just speaking with 1 or 2 other parents, because for the most part, I'm like, I'm not going to this kid's birthday party. Well, now the little girl there's 3 little girls. My daughter's one of this trio that is like, you will not see, like if there's a photo sent home from school, these 3 girls are in it. And so one of them has a birthday the week before her. And so just getting the little tips.
Gotta go.
Yeah. And I'm like asking what she wants for a gift. Do I know this child? Did I bring her into the world? Do I want to spend money on this child that I don't really know, other than it makes drop off a lot easier when she's happy and my daughter sees her. Oh, now I do. So, and that can just, it'd be so nice. Like I don't have, well, I have a mother, but she's not a part of our lives. And so I don't have someone when I'm like, I have hit the wall. I need a glass of wine and 5 minutes on my patio where no one talks to me. To have someone come over and do that so that I can show up as my best parent. My daughter's not having a story for a future therapist, and so a rising tide, not only does that make myself better in the moment, it makes my daughter's development better.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So I can't think of a better expression really, but I do believe a rising tide floats all boats.
I love the fact, because this, my listeners know this. A lot of people, I'm not going to say most people, but a lot of people, when they find someone that, that's beneficial for them, or they figure out something that works so well, they keep it to themselves. They don't want to share. And my thing is, it's enough. Whatever it is, it's enough for all of us. You don't need to hoard it and keep it to yourself. It's enough. So I love that about you, that you are willing to share the information, share the people. And I have experienced that in my own life. And we met, what, a month or 2 months ago, maybe at this point. And I have experienced that from you in my own life, of you just connecting. And hey, I know Crystal, she does this amazingly well. Let me connect you. So I love it. I love it about you.
Sharing is caring unless it's disease.
Oh,
In that case, keep it to yourself.
yeah, keep it to yourself. You know what? I'm gonna start saying that, because everyone has heard the sharing is caring, but not the second part. Unless it's a disease, keep it to yourself. It's an STD. Keep it to yourself. Okay.
Bad attitude is also a disease. So there's that.
Yes.
I used to say that as a nutritionist. That was like all my education and my first decade of career experience was in the nutrition field. And I have clients reach out to me. I've been out of the field for like 12 years now. And they're like, you know what I just said at work? And especially as like the pandemic came in, I was all sorts of people I hadn't heard from in like 8 years, 10 years, 6 years. And they're like, you will not believe what just came flying out of my mouth.
It's gonna come out of mine too. It's gonna come out of mine too. Okay, if someone wants to build a community in their city, in their town, even at work, what would you say is the first thing they need to do?
If it's in a place where you're already going to see the people, so you're not having to figure out how to go to the people and find the people's like work, I would learn how to give non-appearance related compliments.
You said a whole mouthful. Please explain.
So we're taught like giving compliments is hard, and receiving them way harder. That's like where you get your doctorate in humaning, is if you can receive a compliment. I will never forget my drama teacher pulling us aside and saying, you say thank you and you shut up. So I was like, oh, you just said the S word, because we weren't allowed to say stupid or shut up in my house growing up. But being able to we're taught to compliment people on how they look, and not to say that that's wrong, but I heard it on, it like totally, when people find the words for what you've been trying to say forever, that we can do hard things. Glennon said, a teacher of like third graders or something, she's at the school and a little kid says something about somebody's appearance. And she said, remember, we don't say anything about people's appearance because it's the least interesting thing about them. I was like, it is. It really, truly is. It's not their soul. It's not their education. When you're a kid, it's not even their favorite dinosaur. Like, it's the least interesting thing about them. So when you learn to compliment people on, I don't remember, I've been told a lot, like people horrifically saying, you look so exotic, you're so beautiful, you're so exotic.
That's horrible.
Like I just threw up in my mouth a little bit just thinking about it. Or I love your eyes or whatever. It's immediately like, bleh. It's just the immediate ick factor. Now, when someone, especially a woman's like, I love your dress, and I get the opportunity to say, thanks, it has pockets. That's different. That's a love language. You either get it or you don't.
Yes.
But I don't remember a lot of compliments on my looks, really. It didn't change who I was. It didn't build, I don't know anyone in my life because they said something nice about my face. Don't get me wrong. I like to look nice just like everybody else, but, I will never forget. I was working at Starbucks a long time ago, and I had this gentleman come up to me. It was the weirdest thing. He's like, I don't know how to say this. And I'm thinking like, oh no, I'm the store manager at the time. I'm like, I'm going to have to clean up something. This is immediately where my brain goes. And he's like, your aura is just popping, and it's so vibrant and happy, and just, I'm grateful to be around you. He's like, I'm not hitting on you. I just needed to tell you that.
Now that's a compliment.
Yeah. I was like, I didn't know I had an aura, but I love it. And so it doesn't have to be that extreme, but like, if you like, obviously that stands out with people. And so, I think that's a really good way to start building, like learning how to, like the way you just taught me how to do that. Like if you're new at work, the way you just taught me how to do that was really helpful. You're a
Yes.
really good teacher.
Okay.
Or thank you for taking that minute with me. I had no idea what I was doing. Thank you for not making me feel dumb. I know that we're kind of like in an iffy area if we can touch people or not. I'm a high five enthusiast and it doesn't count if it doesn't hurt, which I've learned is not for everybody. But I used to, like, every workplace that I've been in pre-COVID, like the high fives that I get like people are like, I just had the most painful high five and I thought of you. Like, I just really love high fives and I like to hear
Yes.
that noise. So just a way of greeting people. And I also think my preschool teacher, Mrs. Brown, even though she kicked me out of preschool for being too rambunctious, she did teach us that how to make friends. It was actually my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Brown. So until I had to move to the other preschool or kindergarten. Anyways, they were having trouble getting me to interact with the other kids because introvert. But what it really came down to is my mom is a nurse and always talking about clean hands, clean toys, clean, 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 so that we weren't, she's a single mom. She didn't want us home sick all the time. So I had really cool toys, but not very many. My parents were not going to buy us a lot of toys. And so I didn't want to share my toys to get the kids that had dirty hands. That's what the actual reasoning is. But we got a class lesson on how to make friends. I still use it. You say, hi, my name is, and you share something cool about yourself. And then your friend says, hi, my name is, and share something really cool about themselves. And then you ask them to be your friend. And as at 5, you thought, like, that's how I'm going to make friends the rest of my life. So I need
It's
to know
so
that.
easy.
Yeah. Especially when everybody's like, my favorite color is whatever, my favorite dinosaur is whatever, or I'm really into He-Man and She-Ra because I'm an elder millennial. So I still use that. Hi, I'm Sheila. And like, if it's a work thing, I'm usually having to be like, I'm the owner and creative director of the Bulls of Durham. And it's kind of what icebreakers do. You're kind of doing the icebreaker activity for yourself. Another way that I've made a lot of friends in Durham, I'm very passionate about writing. And so when I first moved here, before I had a published book, I joined a writers group. It was called the Durham Writers Group. There was, I think they dissolved, like during COVID or whatever, but we met every Wednesday at this one restaurant. And, a couple of people would share what they had been working on, and we discussed it and built a community that way. And they ended up being some of the first people to buy my book. And I had never shared with them like the website name or how to, but they knew my name and they had started following me, and I didn't know all of that. So there's meetup groups for different interests and what you're going through in life. I just went to the planetarium this weekend for a friend's birthday, and they were talking about how there's astronomy. Astronomy is for real stars. I think astrology is like your zodiac.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So there are astronomy groups in the triangle that like get together and look through telescopes. I'm like, that is the geekiest, most wonderful thing I've ever heard.
That's so cool.
And they're like affiliated with NASA. And I'm like, so whatever you're into, there is a group for it. Hopefully you can find that locally, but I understand what it's like to live in rural communities. You might have to do that online. I have a friend who's going through a breakup that's basically a divorce. They've been together for so long and have kiddos. And so I was like, you really need to find someone who's multiple steps ahead of you, who can say, this is what it looks like on the other side. And she found a group that's just for that, where there's basically like, it's almost like AA for divorcees, You have someone who's been through it, someone who's at the beginning of that journey. They pair together and they have weekly meetings and kind of stuff like that. So whatever you're into, there's somebody else that's into it too.
I was, as you were speaking, I was thinking about someone that I know. Her kids are like all in college or out of college and kind of on their own. And she was talking about how she had to figure out, and I'm sure a lot of mothers go through this, how she had to figure out who she was now that her kids are out of the house. You're not I mean, you're still very instrumental in their life, but like the everyday, bringing them to school, picking them up from school, doing the after school activities. And, you got to figure out who you are now outside of that. So that's kind of what she was going through and looking for a community, as we overuse that word, looking for a community of women or, parents that's already done that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Yeah, community is so important in really whatever aspect of life you are in. And I know we're over our 1 hour. I have a couple more questions for you, and then I'm gonna let you go. So, what do communities do that help them succeed, and what do communities do that help them fail?
I think that help them succeed is they have a thing, right? Like when I'm a part of the writers group, we get together and we talk about writing. That's our thing. We have a next time we're going to meet, or we have something that we have a common thread in our fabric of life.
Okay.
So, more as I've transitioned into motherhood, it was very unexpected for me. I was told that was a medical impossibility by multiple practitioners who can pay for her college for all I care. Having so many people in my community step up in a different way. We knew each other this way now that I'm a mom, and it completely changed my life in different ways. Having people that they're kind of like Amira's, like her auntie network is vast. And so she's the common thread. Okay. My daughter is, I'm pretty sure, the reincarnation of Prince. It's been something that's been a thing since she was 8 weeks of age. We drive to school. She requests Purple Rain. She falls asleep to Prince. It is her life. And, kind of an example of what community looks like near and far. We found the Purple Rain shirt at Target. They have it for toddlers right now. They really know how to get millennial money, and they're so good at it. And I went to all the Targets in the Triangle to get her a 3T, and I share it with my friends. Like, they were all in on this saga.
Yeah.
And I said, before we clean out Target.com, let's see what we have here. She now has 5 of those shirts. She has the collector edition, a record. She also now has another one of my friends, her former nanny, who's buying her a purple record player because she didn't have a record player to play it on. And then all the Prince magazines start showing up. Then there was the request, do we file a complaint with Target for not carrying enough of her size? But she has enough of these shirts until she's 5T.
Yeah.
So I had to tell them again, stop. And so she's the common thing. We keep showing up together for her, and they're invested in her having the best childhood possible. I think the way that communities fail is they don't really connect, and they don't have a thing. Why are we, a lot of people that I met through my project, they love Durham. They might have moved. That happens. The cost of living here is skyrocketing. They're also when you meet a bunch of dope individuals, they're going to be really sought after, and companies are going to, move them here, there, and the other places. But we still have a thing. Now, there's multiple people that I met at events along the way that for that time of life, that's what the event was that I needed to go to, or I was being honored, or a friend was being honored, retiring, whatever. And when that thing goes away, they tend to fall apart. And so I think it's real recognizes real once again. Why are we here? Does this add to my life, or does it subtract from my life? And I think our cups are so empty right now. We can't give anything else that takes from our lives.
It's true. It's true. Oh my goodness. You have been amazing on this podcast, Sheila. You have taught us about community, but you also taught us how to make a friend.
Mrs. Brown, shout out. I don't even know if she's still with us or she is one of the ancestors.
Wow.
All because I was afraid of dirty kid hands.
Yes. Yes.
I still am. It's as a mom.
It's a thing. It's a thing. Okay. So my final question for you, Sheila, who do you think would make a great guest on the podcast, but you have to help me get them on?
My friend Jen Floyd, our daughters are 17 days apart. And so I have 3 people in my life. I always wish them a pre-happy birthday or a birthday eve, because I think it's that day, and I go to text them, and then I have to do ... Eve. And it's always her daughter, because daughter's birthday is the 18th, not the 17th. But you know who I'm going to text on the 17th? Yeah. Jen is a branding and website genius. I have a little side project that I'm working on for my daughter and I, kind of trying to get like some structure to it by her 1-year birthday to present to her. And I'm like talking like my art is words. It's not like visual art.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like taking pictures of random sunsets and pillowcases and cute signs that I see. I have the vision, but I'm not an artist like that.
Right.
And then she was able to like take what I was saying. She knows my purpose behind what I'm doing. And she starts sending me back like actual branding with hex codes and variations and like the meaning, like what these colors mean visually. Da, 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 da. And so I just think it's very interesting. You hear branding, like that's on brand, which is the name of her company. But it's again kind of like community, like it's just getting played out. But when she can see like what is your intention for this company and what impact do you want to have, whether in like, what challenges, if you have an existing company, what challenges are you having? Like you have low website traffic or low conversions, all the boring stuff of business, but like breathe the life into it through visuals and functionality. So, and she's got a dry sense of humor that is like you've already moved on 2 questions and then you start laughing. You're like, oh, so I just think you need kind of her energy is good for a podcast.
Excellent. I cannot wait to speak with her and get to know Miss Jen.
She's wonderful.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for saying yes to this podcast and making time in your schedule and sharing your treasure about community. I am so appreciative of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And to my audience, thank you so much for tuning in, watching, listening, and learning. You can get Sheila's podcast and all of my other podcasts on YouTube Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.